Good morning. The subcommittee will come to order. I want to welcome everyone to the subcommittee markup of the fiscal year 2024 Agriculture, Rural Development, Food and Drug Administration, and related agencies appropriations bill. I'm pleased to be joined by our subcommittee ranking member Bishop and full committee ranking member DeLauro and all the members of the subcommittee. As Americans know all too well, our country continues to face record inflation driven by the overspending of the Biden administration. We simply cannot continue down this path of providing large sums of money without regard to the fiscal future of our nation. This bill takes the same approach American families take every day. They have to do more with less under the Biden economy. American families have to decide every day where to cut back spending to pay for what's most important. Sometimes tough decisions have to be made for the good of the nation's future in the case of this legislation. For fiscal year 2024, the subcommittee's discretionary allocation is $17.2 billion, but by redirecting $8.15 billion in unobligated funds from the American Rescue Plan and the Inflation Reduction Act, this bill funds the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the Food and Drug Administration, and Commodity Futures Trading Commission with an effective allocation of $25.3 billion, a decrease of only 2% from this fiscal year. This legislation supports critical ag research and plant and animal health programs, invests in rural communities, expands access to broadband, provides nutrition assistance to those in need, and ensures that American consumers have a safe food and drug supply. This legislation rejects the Biden administration's unrealistic proposed spending levels that are detached from the dire fiscal reality our country faces. It also rejects the administration's continued push to bloat the inside-the-beltway federal bureaucracy by halting new hires in the Washington, D.C. office, instead focusing on hiring any increased USDA workforce outside the beltway in the offices that directly serve and support rural America. I'd like to highlight a few areas where this legislation prioritizes essential functions while being responsible stewards of taxpayer dollars. Supporting the core mission. This bill provides nearly $1.2 billion for the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service to support the department's efforts to protect our producers from foreign plant and animal diseases. The legislation continues to invest in the delivery of farm programs, disaster assistance, and crop insurance to the farmers and ranchers by maintaining funding for the Farm Service Agency and Risk Management Agency. The bill provides a $39 million increase for the Food Safety and Inspection Service to fully fund our nation's frontline inspectors of meat and poultry products. The Commodity Supplemental Food Program, which provides food to low-income seniors, is increased by $35 million to account for runaway food cost inflation we are all witnessing under the Biden economy. We also make important investments in critical agricultural research that will keep our producers on the cutting edge of technology and production practices. The bill increases funding for USDA's flagship competitive grant program, the Agriculture and Food Research Initiative, by $5 million. This legislation continues to fund rural development programs, including critical infrastructure investments in water and wastewater systems, broadband, and rural housing programs. The bill includes over $260 million for Reconnect to complement generous existing funds to deploy broadband to the most underserved areas. We also continue to provide home ownership loans, but OMB subsidy rates have skyrocketed due to inflation under the Biden economy. So to keep credit flowing in rural areas, the bill increases the budget authority by 87% to support those programs. And rural housing grants have over $100 million available from prior appropriations in addition to what we provide in the bill. For the Food and Drug Administration, the bill provides just over $3.5 billion in direct appropriations, and with increased user fees, FDA has a total budget of $6.6 billion to enable the agency to keep food, drugs, and medical devices safe and effective. The bill includes $345 million for the Commodity Futures Trading Commission to continue to oversee and ensure the integrity of U.S. derivative markets. With regards to fiscal responsibility, at the same time, this legislation reins in some of the administration's wasteful, out-of-control spending. For instance, it removes the Ag Secretary's discretionary use of the Commodity Credit Corporation to fund unauthorized, non-emergency programs returning the statutory language to the pre-COVID language. That alone saves $1 billion in fiscal year 2024, according to the CBO. Given that USDA used these discretionary powers, however, to spend $2.5 billion and $6.6 billion in the last 2 fiscal years, I would submit to my colleagues the real savings to taxpayers of taking these authorities away are even much higher than the CBO score. Let me be clear. Restricting these authorities and returning them to pre-COVID language will have no impact on Farm Bill and conservation programs, crop insurance, or the Secretary's ability to access the CCC in the case of an animal or health emergency. All of those duties and functions will continue under this bill. This legislation also rescinds $6.25 billion in unobligated funds from the American Rescue Plan and wasteful spending in the Inflation Reduction Act. It's been over 3 years since the economy was shut down due to the pandemic, and President Biden formally ended the public health emergency last week. It's finally time to be responsible stewards of taxpayer dollars by rescinding unspent funds from programs that were solely established to respond to an emergency that no longer exists. And this is why we're returning the WIC cash value voucher benefits to a normal, sustainable, inflation-adjusted level. The American Rescue Plan provided a one-time increase in these benefits due to the pandemic, but these increases were built into the WIC program into fiscal year 22 and 23 as well. This bill provides benefits above pre-pandemic levels to account for food price inflation caused by the Biden economy, but with the end of the public health emergency, it's time to return this program to normal pre-COVID operations. The bill provides $6 billion total for WIC, the same appropriation as fiscal year 2023. Participation rates have been steady over the past 3 years, and the Secretary has a WIC contingency fund to meet unexpected demand. As benefit levels return to normal, all eligible participants will be served at this funding level. Programs that have received significant increases through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and American Rescue Plan did not receive additional funding if sufficient balances remain available. Of course, we'll continue to monitor the expenditure of these funds as the process moves forward. On the regulatory front, this legislation puts a stop to USDA's effort under the Packers and Stockyards Act to dictate how poultry and livestock producers raise and market their animals. It will also prevent the purchase of farmland by companies owned by our foreign adversaries, while providing funds for the Farm Service Agency to fulfill its duty to track foreign ownership of land. The bill also returns the use of mifepristone to in-person dispensing by a healthcare provider. This is a drug that should not be used without the supervision of a physician. Anyone who truly cares, who genuinely cares about women's health and safety, should support this position. Finally, as I said earlier, this bill takes the same approach American families take every day. They simply have to do more with less under the Biden economy. American families decide every day where to cut back spending to pay for what's most important. You know, we're not appropriating monopoly money. It's the hard-earned taxpayer dollar, and sometimes tough decisions have to be made. In conclusion, I want to thank the staff on the subcommittee and would note that the subcommittee received nearly 8,000 member requests touching every agency under our jurisdiction. The strong interest in this bill highlights its importance to the lives of all Americans. We've attempted to address both Republican and Democrat member requests within the available budget through community project funding, programmatic funding, and bill and report language. I look forward to working with all of you as this bill moves forward, and I ask for your support for this legislation. Now I will recognize the ranking member of the subcommittee, Mr. Bishop, for his opening remarks.
Good morning, and thank you, Chairman Harris. For the past couple of years, when I woke up in the morning on markup day for this subcommittee, I often reminded myself of the biblical admonition, "This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it." That is because when we came to mark up this bill over the last several years, I was able to say that the work done by the agencies that we were funding would touch the lives of every American. I often say that the bill helps to ensure that America has the highest quality, the safest, the most abundant, the most affordable food and fiber, the medicine and medical devices anywhere in the industrialized world. This bill also means, and I was always excited because it would give us the opportunity, and this bill is the vehicle by which rural America, our rural communities, the heartland of our nation, are supported. Rural America, north, south, east, west, small towns, sparsely populated areas, actually produce most of the food and fiber that all of us consume. Yet 92% of rural America is persistent poverty counties, low tax bases, high unemployment, lack of access to health care services. And this is true more in red counties than blue. So I'm concerned today as I come here because it's very difficult, despite my faith, to rejoice in this markup. Because today this bill turns its back on rural America. It's a retreat from our most vulnerable communities. This bill really makes it more difficult to implement the purpose and to have a level playing field for all Americans. Over the past 2 decades, our country and the agriculture industry has grown. Yet, this bill would return Americans' agriculture funding back to the 2006 levels, with an allocation of $17.1 billion, nearly $8 billion below last year's enacted bill. For the past 2 years, USDA has been working hard to implement policies and making investments that America's farmers, rural communities, and families have been promised and are really counting on us to continue to help rebuild from the pandemic, countless natural disasters, and other challenges outside of their control. This subcommittee has provided the resources in the past to jumpstart these efforts. But the bill today would take away food assistance from women, children, and make it difficult for them to consistently, and it would take it from vulnerable people, from veterans, from seniors, people with health conditions that would make it difficult for them to consistently work. It calls for new work requirements for SNAP recipients, which exacerbates the cycle of poverty, particularly in rural communities. SNAP recipients who can work do work, yet those in rural community don't often earn enough to escape poverty, particularly those with limited job opportunities and for those whose employers cut their hours. America cannot thrive if Americans are hungry. And this bill affects 6 million of our fellow Americans who will lose SNAP benefits due to the increased work requirements. It takes food out of the mouths of nearly 5 million hungry women and children by rescinding $500 million in WIC funding. Since the late 1990s, this Appropriation Committee's bipartisan practice has been to provide enough funds for WIC to serve all eligible applicants. This bill limits USDA's ability to do this. It also reduces the levels for WIC fruit and vegetable vouchers by $1.2 billion, hurting both families and farmers. Nearly 4.6 million women and children would lose benefits in FY24. That's 4.6 million people that American farmers will not be able to feed, and $1.2 billion of lost revenue to farmers. While I often say that food is medicine, and it is, we must make sure we have safe prescription drugs and medical devices. They're crucial to the well-being of our loved ones. When supply chains are broken or safety is compromised, the cost is dire, not just in dollars, but in lives lost. We must provide the resources for a robust inspection regime to hold domestic and foreign manufacturers accountable. This bill, as you have heard, strips the Secretary of Agriculture of the discretionary use of the Commodity Credit Corporation funding. Just yesterday, the subcommittee received a letter from Secretary Vilsack announcing his intention to use the CCC authority to provide emergency grain storage in Kentucky and at least 9 other states hit by severe weather. His letter cites several of the provisions blocked by the language in the House bill. The CCC is a tool to benefit agriculture producers, no matter which party is in the White House. The only folks that suffer when any administration is not allowed to use the CCC at its discretion are our ag producers. The majority is also eliminating nearly $2 billion in FSA farm loan modification assistance to distressed borrowers in immediate danger of losing their farm operations. To date, the department has been able to help keep more than 20,000 farmers in business through this initiative, including nearly 5,000 farmers in Texas, Maryland, and Alabama, and other states represented by the majority. Why do you want to put farmers and ranchers out of business? How can you justify allowing hardworking farmers to go into foreclosure right as we're coming out of the pandemic and just recovering from the floods, the wildfires, the hurricanes, the typhoons, and the droughts? We cannot cynically retreat from rural America when Congress is the steadfast partner needed to help it grow. Rural America is the cornerstone of this country's agriculture industry. These communities rely on crucial infrastructure, from water and wastewater systems to high-speed internet. Yet these projects have huge upfront costs that their smaller tax base cannot bear alone. Community facilities grants are cut by this bill 90%, stopping the progress in bringing affordable health care to underserved rural communities. For example, this bill includes a 30% cut to rural water and waste disposal loans and a 36% cut to waste disposal grants. That's 325 projects for rural water and wastewater systems that will not happen. That is thousands of families not sure if they'll be able to turn on the spigot and get clean water to drink. The bill also eliminates funding for the Distressed Communities Program, which means hundreds of small local governments will not be able to renovate their systems to meet EPA standards for getting arsenic and lead out of the drinking water. And the nearly 30% cut to the single-family direct housing loans from $1.25 billion in FY23 to $900 million in '24 will make it harder for rural Americans to afford to buy a house. This means that over 2,800 rural families will not be able to get financing to buy a home. And this is not just going to impact my constituents in Middle and Southwest Georgia. These programs serve rural communities all across the country. Maryland received $23.4 million in rural water grants and loans. Alabama received $26.2 million. Iowa received $133.8 million. Michigan, $144.1 million. Washington State, $32.9 million. Louisiana, $35.3 million. Virginia, $65.5 million. And California, $167.3 million. This bill also rescinds $500 million from the Renewable Energy for America program, the REAP program, just before the House Agriculture Committee begins drafting the Farm Bill. Farmers face high input costs, and the majority is limiting the reach of this program, which helps them lower their energy bills with the energy-efficient projects. Rural electric cooperatives across this country help close the gap in our power grid, stepping in to ensure rural communities have access to affordable energy. Over 900 rural electric cooperatives serve 42 million people across 48 states, including 92% of persistent poverty counties, those who can least afford to build and maintain this crucial infrastructure. Yet, this bill will slash $3.25 billion in funding for these nonprofit electric co-ops. This bill will directly result in a huge rate hike for the people these cooperatives serve. Why would you cut this funding as electric co-ops are just gearing up to use the program? Let me just talk a little bit about riders. This bill, as you have heard, reverses the 2023 FDA decision to permanently make mifepristone available over the counter. It infringes on women's rights to make their own decisions regarding their reproductive health choices. This blocks the rulemaking, all rulemaking with regard to the gypsy issue, small poultry producers who are getting killed by the large companies. No funds for critical race theory related work. What in the tarnation does critical race theory have to do with what we are doing here today? Absolutely nothing. It repeats, it blocks the Biden executive orders on diversity, equality, inclusion, and support for underserved communities that were designed to create equal opportunity for all Americans to access the USDA programs. USDA has a long and storied history of discrimination. It's unquestioned, yet this bill would undermine the efforts to try to equalize opportunity for access to everyone. This bill is also petty. It blocks funding for the Office of Communication of the Secretary of Agriculture because of a press release he put out on the debt limit. This is absolutely ridiculous. The bill should be a vehicle by which we help Americans from all walks of life. But what's here today before us does not meet the moment. Our farmers, our producers, our rural communities deserve a more reliable partner in this committee and in this Congress. Too much is at stake, from the food we eat to the medicine and the medical devices on which we rely on, the fiber and the materials that help clothe and build our country. Our national security. Americans deserve better. We can do better. We're better than this. The American people deserve better. It's my hope that we can come together in this committee between now and the end of this appropriations process, that we can sit down and reasonably look forward at how we can help the American people, not hurt them, how we can preserve and cause our rural communities to thrive. Never in this country should we be satisfied so that a child or a family or a small business that has its potential limited and its opportunities curtailed simply because it is located in an RFD zip code. We should not condone that, and this subcommittee is responsible for addressing it. We need to do our jobs. We need to take care of the American people, and I believe that if we reasonably look to each other, and I appreciate the fact that the chairman has been willing to sit down and talk about it, but I hope that we can actually find some middle ground, because this bill does not meet the challenges with which the American people are faced. We need to do better. I yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bishop. Now I'll turn to the ranking member of the full committee, Ms. DeLauro, for any remarks she may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And first, may I just say I associate myself with the remarks that have been made by the ranking member of the subcommittee. We are at the third subcommittee markup for the 2024 appropriations process under a majority that has not established a discretionary allocation for the committee and has yet to reveal its 12 subcommittee allocations. I just would footnote that to say that as a former chair of the full committee, and my predecessor, Congresswoman Nita Lowey, and she served as chair, we provided the subcommittee chairs with an allocation 3 weeks in advance. All of the allocations were set out at the outset of the process. House Republicans appear to be proceeding because of a promise they made to each other to slash the non-defense programs that our families depend on to thrive. After removing rescissions, the agriculture bill provides a total funding level so insufficient that it was last seen in 2006. 2006. It's a sham proposal built on $8 billion in alleged savings that will likely not be available next year. The cuts in the bill are harmful, including slashing the Women, Infants, and Children WIC program by $500 million, cutting the Renewable Energy and America program by $500 million, gutting investments in rural electric co-ops for clean energy and energy efficiency by $3.25 billion, eliminating loans that serve as a financial lifeline that has already helped more than 20,000 distressed farmers from keeping, and it would keep hardworking farmers from going into foreclosure. Going into foreclosure. It's an issue that is relevant to rural farmers. Taking the food out of the mouths of veterans, of children, of seniors, and people with disabilities who rely on the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, people who have health conditions that prevent them from consistently working. It is full of policy riders that focus more on social policy issues, catering to an ideological extreme than helping farmers and Americans everywhere who rely on funding in this bill for the food they eat and for the medicines they take. The bill would reverse the FDA decision to allow mifepristone to be dispensed in certified pharmacies instead of only by prescribers in hospitals, clinics, and medical offices. This policy rider would overrule the established scientific process for FDA approval to restrict women's access to health care. The move is unprecedented. The subcommittee has no business overturning the considered 20-year decision of the FDA. What scientific authority or knowledge do you have to overturn medical decisions? It also contains 2 riders on tobacco, prohibiting limits on menthol cigarettes and flavored cigars, and stopping any limits on the amount of nicotine in cigarettes. What will be the health consequences? What will be the life expectancy consequences? I strongly oppose both of these riders in the interest of public health. In short, this bill presumably reflects Republican values, taking food out of the mouths of hungry people, creating hurdles for women to access medication, raising energy costs for rural Americans, making it harder for small farmers and poultry producers to make ends meet, while at the same time tipping the scale in favor of big corporations and protecting big tobacco. I would just like to quote, because I think it's important to quote, our Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack. Today, House Republicans proposed stark cuts to USDA's programs, and in some cases, whole offices, in a way they know would only harm America's economy and communities. The proposal is pathetic, it is punitive, and it is petty. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you very much, Ms. DeLauro. At this time, does any other member of the subcommittee wish to be recognized for opening remarks? Hearing none, does any member have an amendment they wish to offer?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Bishop.
I don't have an amendment, but I'd like to offer into the record, to accompany my statement, a letter from the America's Electric Cooperatives, NRECA, in their reaction to this bill that is being marked up today, where they express extreme disappointment and opposition to it.
And Mr. Bishop, would you like to do that without with unanimous consent?
I'd like to ask unanimous consent.
With unanimous consent?
Thank you.
So ordered. I'd like to recognize Mr. Valadeo for the purpose of making a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move the bill be favorably reported to the full committee.
The question is on the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no.
No!
The ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to. I ask unanimous consent that staff be permitted to make technical and conforming changes to the bill and report. Without objection, so ordered. As a reminder to members, please leave all copies of the bill and report in the room at your desk. Copies of the bill and report with technical and conforming changes will be delivered to all full committee members' offices no later than 3 business days before full committee markup, so you'll receive copies tomorrow. Without objection, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Thank you. There you go. You see, you got one, right? All right. There you go. You got it back with my changes in there. All right.
We've got these, but I'll take that.